Hello, my name is Emily Otten, and this is my final project for HDFS 1500 Human Development over a Lifespan. This will just kind of be an overview of my life through what I've learned in this class, kind of applying some of the key points of the class. So let's just get right into my presentation. I'm going to start with a little bit of a backstory about my family. I have 4 siblings, you'll see right over here, and 2 lovely parents. 9 years before I was born, they had my sister Megan, who is now the second youngest in our family because of, me. And a few short years after they gave birth to Megan, my mother had a dream about a little girl just playing contently by herself, humming some music and singing, and she was told that this little girl's name was Emily and that this would be her next child. So, of course, that dream was about me, and when my mom woke up, she was kind of shocked, and she woke up my dad and was like, "We need to have another kid." And my dad was kind of a little bit confused, but I mean, he was on board with it, and so they started to try for another child. And it took a little while for my mom to be able to conceive me, hence the 9-year gap between me and my second youngest sibling. We'll start with prenatal. My mom, when I asked her what it was like being pregnant with me, she told me that she was always sick, but she didn't struggle with it too much. It didn't bring her down because she loved being pregnant and she was so excited for me, so she didn't mind it all that much, which surprises me because if I was sick all the time, I think I'd be a little bit grouchy. She craved tomatoes, she said, which is hilarious because I love tomatoes. I will eat them like apples. I love them so much. So that just turned out to be something really funny to me that I never knew. She had a very healthy pregnancy. She exercised and ate healthy, and she gained 20 pounds, and she said that I was always moving, that I never stopped moving, especially when there was music. And so that made church really hard for my mom because anytime the organ would start and people would start singing, I'd start moving a whole lot. And she said that sometimes she would have to get up and go walk in the halls because I was moving so much. She told me a story of my brother Nick, who had a drum set at the time. And she said that he was just playing away one day and he hit a really loud beat when she was nearby, and I just jolted in her stomach, and she could have sworn that I was about to pop right out because it hurt so bad. She said that I loved sound and being involved with people even when when I was just in her tummy. And so she knew that I was going to be a very active child and baby. The next stage is birth. And I was due September 3rd of 1997. But I had different plans. My mother's water broke July 29th at 6:40 p.m. 5 weeks before my actual due date. My mom said that she refused to go to the hospital until my aunt came over and painted her toenails. And so my aunt had to come over and paint her toenails, and they finally made it to the hospital by about 8 o'clock, and the doctors immediately put her on bed rest in fear about me being premature. They were worried that something might be wrong or something like that. By 1 o'clock, she finally went into labor, and by 5 o'clock, I was out. I was alive and quite well for a mature baby. My mom said it was a really easy pregnancy. It wasn't long, and she wasn't in a ton of pain, which I think was my gift to her, I guess. Like I said, I was very healthy. I was 6 pounds, 12 ounces, and 19 inches long. The doctors were very surprised, considering the fact that, you know, I wasn't supposed to come for 5 more weeks. But everybody just fell in love with me the moment I was there. Both of my parents and especially my siblings, who just always had the desire to hold me and be around me. My parents had a really hard time ever getting me away from them, for sure, especially my oldest brother, Tyler, who was 16 at the time of my birth. So that wraps up birth, and let's move on. So the next section is infancy, which is birth to 2 years old. I was a very happy baby, but I was also a very sleepy baby. I slept through the night all the time, and truthfully through the day also. There wasn't really a time where someone wasn't holding me. I was always being held, rarely ever put down unless it was to go to bed at night. So I kind of got used to that, and after a couple of months, I could no longer sleep without someone holding me or rocking me to sleep. But that wasn't much of a problem still then, because everybody was still holding me. So it wasn't a huge problem for my parents. My siblings loved me. They spent every waking moment with me when they were out of school or anything like that. It was really easy for my parents because it wasn't just them taking care of me, it was also my siblings, which was really cool experience for me growing up, because I was more of a family baby rather than my parents' baby. I didn't cry often. Like I said, I was very happy. The only time I really would get upset was when there was contention in my house and there was a lot of fighting, which I had 3 teenage brothers, so that was quite often before I came. But after I came, they said that it quieted down because I would cry anytime someone would fight, and so they kind of stopped fighting to keep me from crying, which I kind of became the peacemaker of my family even then, which was really cool to find out. At 6 months old, I got the case of chicken pox. So bad. They were in my ears, in my eyes, down my throat, and in my nose, and everything like that. But my mom still said that even though I seemed miserable, I was still so happy. I was smiling still and laughing and giggling. My siblings would take care of me. It was she said that it wasn't as hard as it probably could have been. 11 months in, I got into everything. I loved pulling out the Tupperware cupboard and going and laying in it, and that would just make such a huge mess. I had to have my feet up on my high chair, or else I would not eat. I kind of throw a bit of a fit once I could reach that edge of the high chair. Even at such a young age, I was extremely silly and knew atmospheres really well. So if someone was upset or sad, the first thing I'd try to do was make them laugh. And it was kind of cool finding that out, that I was so in tune with people even at such a young age. I'll show you a video of me just being a little bit silly here.
You ready to go?
You got some lipstick on now?
Yeah.
Let me see it.
Sean.
Let me see it.
Perfect. Shall we go show Cassandra?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get a picture first. Outside. I'm going to get a picture of the pumpkins.
Okay.
Let me see that lipstick.
Show him.
No, let me see.
I Okay. You silly. You're a character.
Where are you going?
Outside
Cassandra's house?
the house.
Outside the house, I think she said.
Okay, see you later.
Treating.
No. Bye.
Say trick or treat.
Trick or treat.
And I think that concludes infancy. So we'll move on. So next up is early childhood, which is 2 to 6. And it's Erickson's initiative versus guilt. And I was definitely more on the initiative side. I kind of, like I said, I got into everything. I was always running around. I couldn't sit still a lot of the time. There was always something to be doing. I was very wild and still such a happy child. I loved dancing at this age. My mom got me into dance class, and I loved music, and so I just dance around with my siblings all the time. I'll show you a video of me and my brother Tyler dancing.
Dance with me, kid.
What are you doing, Em?
We're dancing, huh? Wow. There's Mama.
Hi, Emily.
Go like this, go. Amy, go like this.
Woo, she's a wild woman. Oh, she's silly.
Dance, Amy. Go. Now go like this, go.
I loved my siblings. I spent almost all the time with them, or they spent almost all their time with me. I loved bugs. My parents thought this was really weird for a little girl, but I did. I loved bugs. Every time it would rain, I'd have to go save the worms. And that's another video I'll kind of show you over here.
Okay, show me your collection. Who is that one? Did you give him a name?
Yes, King.
King? That's his name. Why is he the king?
Because he's the biggest.
He's the biggest? Did you give all the other ones names too?
Yeah.
What are their names?
Baby.
What?
His name is Baby.
Why?
Because I wanted to call him that.
Where did you get all those worms?
We found him in the rain last night.
In the rain?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with them?
Get more rooms when it rains.
Yeah, but what are you going to do with them? Are you going to eat them?
No.
No? You don't think they'll taste good?
No. I'm gonna keep him for a year.
For a year?
And this name is Han.
Where are you going to put them?
Back where they live.
You know, birds might come along and eat them. Birds love worms. You don't believe me?
And this name is called Flipper.
Slipper?
Yeah, 'cause he was stuck last night.
Yeah, that's because you kept them all in your slippers last night, didn't you?
And
Now
this
your
name
slippers are all dirty.
is Pinch.
Gross.
Pinch. 'Cause he's sitting on the bench.
Because he's sitting on the bench.
I was completely content playing on my own. I actually didn't like being with friends a whole lot. I preferred to be on my own because then I could use the right side of my brain to create my own worlds, and I didn't have to take anyone else's opinions into consideration. And I really thrived being alone. I did have some imaginary friends. I had a lot of imaginary friends, actually. I know that you wanted to see a picture of that paper, but I could not find it to save my life. So I'll just tell you about them. I had about a new imaginary friend every day, but they wouldn't last very long. It would be 1 or 2 days, and then I would think of some weird way to kill them off. One fell off the roof, another one fell down a gutter drain, and so on and so forth. But there was one that stayed with me for a long time, and his name was Poji, and he was an old man that lived in front of my house in the gutter, and he was my best friend for a really long time, and we kind of did everything together, and my parents were really supportive of all of my imaginary friends, and they kind of just laughed and had fun with it as much as they could. At this age, I was also diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD, which was very hard on such a young girl because all of a sudden she was pegged as different. But that kind of ended my early childhood, and now I guess we'll go on to the next stage. So in middle childhood, the ages are 6 to 11, and in this stage I started to create bonds with other kids, which I didn't have before. I had 3 really close friends. I had Mikkel, a little girl that lived down the street from me, and then I had Zach and Trent. I have a picture of Mikkel, but I don't have a picture of Zach and Trenton, but you will see them later in this video. I started to pull away from my siblings a little bit. They started to grow up, become teenagers, move out of the house. I didn't get as much time with them as I did before, so I kind of became more independent away from them. I had a terrible, terrible fear of being alone, and that created something really hard for my parents, because I didn't like to be alone. I liked to know that someone was always nearby me. And when I would wake up in the middle of the night, no one would be near me, so I would kind of throw a little bit of a fit, and I would crawl into my parents' bed with them. And I actually did that for a really long time, up into my preteen years, where I just had this unreal fear of being alone. And I blamed it on the dark for a really long time, but it really came down to being alone. So this stage is Erickson's stage of industry versus inferiority. Excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. I was definitely on the industry side. I didn't really care what people thought about me. I was bullied a lot in school for my learning disability and for being different than everybody else, but I didn't really care. And I was kind of, like I said, I marched the beat of my own drum. If someone else was being bullied, I'd stand up for them. If someone was calling me names, I'd stand up for myself. I was the type of girl that, like, you called me a name, I'm gonna punch you in the face type girl. And so I kind of like just took initiative and really started to create myself. At that age, I was a tomboy, and I really, one summer, both of my guy friends, Zach and Trent, were going to a football camp, and I really wanted to go with them. But my parents told me that girls don't play football, and so I wasn't allowed to go. So when they would come home in the afternoon from this day camp, they would teach me how to play football. They would put me through their own version of this camp, which was really fun. It created a really tight bond between all 3 of us. I really loved Pokemon at this time. All of my friends, as you can tell, I hung out with boys more than girls, and we played Pokemon all the time. It was so much fun. We created this game that we played for years, and we just loved, and we collected cards together, and we traded cards together, and it really created that tight bond between all of us also. And at the end of my middle childhood was when my second brother, Nick, got married. And I was about 9 years old at the time. And so at that point, I really felt like I started to lose my family a little bit more. And I started to pull away from them at that early age. But it was a joyous time. I got a sister-in-law, and only a year or two later I got my first nephew. And so it was a joyous time as well as a hard time for me. But that actually ends middle childhood. So the next stage is adolescence, which is 12 to 18. This was a really hard time for me, like it is for most adolescents. All of my siblings got married at kind of like the beginning or the middle of my adolescence. My brother Tyler, my oldest brother, got married when I was 12. My brother Josh got married when I was 13. And my sister Megan got married when I was 15. And so I was an only child for a lot of my adolescence years. I kind of didn't have those bonds that I had when I was a little girl, and that was really hard for me because I went from having them to not having them, and that's where that fear of being alone came in again. And I became very self-conscious of who I was as a person. The bullying kind of started to get to me. My chest got bigger earlier than most girls, and so I wore baggy clothes and beanies and kind of tried to hide my face in the background of things. I really started to care what people thought about me. But I did have a great friend group from the very beginning. Those two boys that I talked about earlier, Zach and Trent, we kind of created our own little group of guys, and one girl, Catherine, and she moved in a little bit later, and she's now my best friend in the whole world all throughout those years and even now. And the neighborhood called us the gang, which was really fun. So it was a good thing that I had them. It was really hard for me because of my emotions changing and my brain chemistry kind of changing and everything, and my hormones and all of that. I was angry all the time, and me and my parents didn't get along. I didn't trust them anymore. I didn't talk to them about anything. And I actually, towards the middle of high school and the end of high school, I actually got into drugs and alcohol and tobacco, which was very, very hard. And on my family and on me as well. I had found a friend group that wasn't probably the best influence on me, and that was really hard. What kind of led up to that was I had started with depression and anxiety pretty early in my adolescence years. Like I said, that fear of being alone just kind of affected me a whole lot. And so I fell into a really deep depression, but I didn't want to take medications, and I didn't want to really notice that this was happening to me because I didn't want to be different. And so along with this depression, this anxiety, I actually started self-harming, and that's where the drugs and the alcohol and the tobacco came into play. And I used to use a razor blade and cut on myself. But it was also a time where I found out kind of what I wanted to do in life and who I really was and what I was good at. I found out that I loved stage crew and theater, and so that was something I threw myself into. I also loved art and ceramics. I was very creative, and reading, because I got to use that right side of my brain again. I realized that in the future I really wanted to help people, and that was kind of like an aha moment that this is what I wanted to do in life. I ended up graduating high school, which was a miracle, and I was so proud of myself. And that kind of ended my adolescence years. I then turned 18, and I guess I'll go into that in the next slide. So this is the last section, and it's emerging adulthood, which is 18 to 40, or in my case, 18 to 21, going on 22. So this is Erickson's stage of intimacy versus isolation. And at the beginning of this, I was still struggling with my depression and my anxiety and all of that. And so I was definitely more on the isolation part of things. I wasn't very good at making friends. All of my guys and Catherine had moved away, and all of my guys had gone on LDS missions. And so I really didn't have anyone, but I still wanted to go to college, so I left for Snow College in the fall of 2015, and I thought that I'd make a ton of friends there. Well, that was really hard for me, and I really didn't make any friends. And I was not outgoing. I didn't really try all that hard. I'm sure if I tried, I would have succeeded a little bit better, but I just became very isolated, and even though I was doing good in school, it wasn't working out for me, and I was just very unhappy with my life. And this is the point where I kind of was just done, and I actually tried to commit suicide. And that was something that was extremely hard on my parents because they didn't know what to do or how to help me, and truthfully, I didn't even know how to help myself. Shortly after that, I was hospitalized, and when I got out, I decided I didn't want to go back to school, but I wanted to change my life. And so I quit my drugs and my tobacco and drinking, and I really stabilized in my mental health aspect. My life kind of improved. I got a really good job at North Valley Behavioral Health in Salt Lake, helping people of the homeless population and a disability population of Salt Lake with teaching classes on depression, anxiety, and computer classes, and how to quit smoking, and things like that. So I really got to take a hold of what I thought was my destiny of helping people and really put it to use. And it really improved my life quite a bit. But I still didn't have a social life. All of the guys were still gone, and I still was not good at making friends. So about a year and a half into my new job, I decided to go back to school, which was a really hard decision I had to make because my first time around didn't work out so well. So what would make this one different? Well, I decided that even though that was my thought process, I still wanted to try. And so I went. I started in the fall of 2017 at USU. Go Aggies! And I was doing better. I was doing good in classes, and even though I hadn't made a ton of friends and I hadn't been super outgoing, me and my roommates became very, very close. And that was very nice for me. And in that year, I started a new job again, and I worked for NES, Northeastern Services, helping people with disabilities and in-home living situations. So I once again got to take that talent that I had and run with it. And I then decided that I wanted to go into social working. So I started taking classes that would lead me into that program. About halfway through that year, I decided I wanted to go to Africa, and so I applied to a program and I got in. And so for a couple of months I prepared to leave the country by myself, something that was so huge for me because of my anxiety. And I got to go to a different country and work with kids and see the culture of a different people and really get to see the aspect of how other countries live. And it really fueled my fire for wanting to help children. And so I figured out kind of what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, working with the foster system and with foster kids, giving them opportunities. So that experience was just huge for me. I learned tons of new skills and was able to be there for 2 months, 9 weeks on my own. And I was able to overcome so many obstacles that got in my way and really prove to myself that I was worth something to me. Right after getting home, I realized that I had become a new person, and I had self-confidence. I loved myself for who I was. Didn't matter what anyone thought. So my self-esteem kind of skyrocketed right after this. I became very outgoing this last school year. I've made tons of new friends. I've got tons of different groups. I can talk to strangers very, very easily. So just within the past 2 years, my whole life has kind of turned a 360, which has been really cool to watch. I now am getting ready to serve LDS mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I haven't got my call yet, but I'm getting very excited because of this 360 that my life has turned. I'm able to do things like this and be a part of something much greater than who I am. And I'm so excited. This whole class experience has been very eye-opening to me, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you so much for teaching me and for being patient with all of us college students. I know it must be hard sometimes, but I'm very grateful for you and for this opportunity I had to go through videos and pictures, and it was really fun. So thank you so much, and that's the end.